The great hall of the Galactic Council buzzed with sounds that no human ear could make. Clicks, growls, and high-pitched whistles filled the air as hundreds of alien beings took their seats. The massive room stretched up so high that clouds formed. Near the ceiling, giant screens floated in the air, showing the faces of delegates who could not travel here in person. Captain Jake Harrison sat in the small human section, his dark blue uniform-looking plane next to the bright colors and strange shapes around him. Next to him, Lieutenant Lisa Carter held a datapad ready to take notes. They were the only two humans in a room full of creatures who thought humans were weak and stupid. Ambassador Krelthok stepped forward to the center of the room. He was tall and thin, with gray skin that looked like stone. His forearms moved as he spoke, and his voice was cold and hard. "Today we discuss the human problem," Krelthok said. His words echoed through the hall. "These creatures think they can fight alongside us. They think they belong in our armies. But we all know the truth." Laughter filled the room, but it was not human laughter. It sounded like breaking glass and grinding metal. The Thoraxian delegates made deep rumbling sounds, while the Zephyrians clicked their tongues in what passed for humor among their kind. Commander Veximer rose from his seat. He was massive, with thick armor covering his body and 6 arms that ended in sharp claws. His species had conquered 12 star systems through pure strength alone. "Let me show you what humans call military training," Veximer said. He touched a control, and the floating screens came to life. The footage showed human soldiers trying to lift weights that alien children could handle easily. It showed them running obstacle courses that took them minutes to complete, while other species finished in seconds. The humans in the video looked tired and weak, struggling with tasks that seemed simple. "Look at them," Veximer said with disgust. "Their bones break if you touch them too hard. Their skin tears like paper. They cannot see in the dark. They cannot breathe in most atmospheres. They die if the temperature gets too hot or too cold." More laughter filled the room. Captain Harrison felt his hands form fists, but he kept them hidden under the table. Lisa Carter's face stayed calm, but her fingers gripped her datapad tighter. A delegate from the Aquatic Federation spoke up, his voice bubbling through his water-filled helmet. "My people have gills and can survive in space for short periods. What can humans do that we cannot do better?" "Nothing," called out another voice from the crowd. "They are the weakest species in the galaxy." Krelthok raised his forearms for silence. "The facts are clear. In the last war, human casualties were 3 times higher than any other species. They require special equipment just to breathe on. Most worlds, they need constant medical care. They slow down our operations and put real soldiers at risk." The screens now showed graphs and numbers. Human strength compared to other species. Human speed compared to others. Human intelligence test scores. Every chart showed humans at the bottom or near the bottom. "But they have spirit," said a small voice from the corner. The room went quiet. Everyone turned to look at Captain Harrison, who had spoken without permission. "I said they have spirit," Harrison repeated, standing up. His voice was steady but not loud. "You show us lifting weights, but you do not show us never giving up. You show us running slowly, but you do not show us running until we die trying." Veximer laughed, a sound like boulders falling down a mountain. "Spirit does not stop laser beams, human. Spirit does not make your weak bones stronger." "No," Harrison said. "But it makes us fight when others would run. It makes us stand when others would fall." "Brave words from a species that has never won a major battle without help," Krelthok said. The room erupted in more alien laughter. Lisa Carter stood up next to her captain. "We request the right to speak for our people." "You may speak," Krelthok said, "but it will not change anything. The vote has already been decided." Harrison looked around the room at hundreds of faces that looked nothing like his own. Some had huge eyes, others had no eyes at all. Some breathed air, others breathed gases that would kill him in seconds. But they all looked at him the same way, like he was something small and weak and pathetic. "You think you know us?" Harrison said. "You think we are just weak copies of you. But you are wrong about one thing." "What is that?" Kralthik asked. You think like soldiers? You think like warriors? You think like conquerors? Harrison paused and looked directly at the ambassador. We think like humans. The room was quiet for a moment. Then the laughter started again, louder than before. The vote is called, Kralthik announced. All in favor of banning humans from military operations? Hundreds of arms, claws, tentacles, and other appendages rose into the air. The floating screens lit up with votes from distant worlds. The count was overwhelming. Motion passed, Kralthik said. Humans are hereby banned from participating in any military action deemed dangerous to galactic security. This includes all combat operations, peacekeeping missions, and strategic planning sessions. As the delegates began to file out, Captain Harrison heard their conversations. They spoke in dozens of languages, but the translation devices made sure he understood every word. Finally, no more babysitting the humans. Now we can fight properly without worrying about their weak bodies. Maybe they can stay home and grow food or something useful. Lisa Carter packed up her datapad slowly. What do we do now, sir? Harrison watched the last of the alien delegates leave the hall. Soon, only the two humans remained in the vast empty space. We go home, Harrison said quietly, and we get ready. Ready for what? Harrison looked up at the screens that still showed charts comparing human abilities to other species. Every number showed humans as inferior. Every graph put them at the bottom. Every test proved they were the weakest, slowest, most fragile beings in the galaxy. We get ready to prove them wrong, he said. Outside the hall, the alien delegates continued their conversations. They joked about human weakness and laughed about how easy the vote had been. None of them noticed the small human ship leaving the station. None of them thought about what humans might do when pushed too far. In 6 months, they would remember this day very differently. 6 months had passed since the Galactic Council banned humans from military service. The galaxy had been quiet during those months. Trade continued between the star systems, and the great alien fleets patrolled their territories with confidence. Nobody expected the darkness that was coming from the outer rim. The first sign of trouble came from a mining station on the edge of known space. The station simply went silent. One day it was sending regular reports about mineral extraction, and the next day nothing. The Galactic Defense Force sent a patrol ship to investigate, but that ship never returned either. Admiral Zorkith, commander of the Draconian fleet, was not worried. He was 8 feet tall and covered in scales that could stop most weapons. His people had conquered half the galaxy through strength alone. When 3 more stations went silent, he decided to investigate personally. Probably just equipment failures. Zarkith told his crew as they approached the Zarian system. Or maybe pirates. We will deal with whatever it is quickly. The Draconian battlecruiser Dominance was one of the most powerful ships in the galaxy. Its weapons could destroy small moons, and its armor could survive the explosion of a star. Zarkith stood on the bridge, confident that nothing could threaten his mighty vessel. They found the first mining station drifting in space, dark and cold. There were no signs of life, but also no signs of battle. The station looked normal from the outside. Send a boarding party, Zorkith ordered. The Draconian soldiers who boarded the station were the best warriors in the galaxy. Each one could fight 10 normal beings and win. They carried weapons that could cut through solid steel and wore armor that could stop tank shells. 20 minutes later, the boarding party stopped responding to calls. What is happening over there? Zorkith demanded, but there was no answer. Then, the sensors detected something approaching fast, very fast. Zorkith had never seen ships move like that before. They were sleek and black with no visible weapons or engines. But they moved through space like living things, changing direction, without slowing down. Battle stations, Zorkith roared. Prepare all weapons. The first enemy ship reached the Dominance before the weapons could fire. Instead of attacking, it simply touched the hull of the great battle cruiser. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the lights on the ship began to flicker. What are they doing to us? Asked the tactical officer. The answer came quickly. The enemy ship was learning. It was studying the dominance, figuring out how it worked, discovering its weaknesses. In minutes, it knew everything about draconian technology, more enemy ships arrived, and now they attacked with perfect knowledge of how to hurt the dominance. They hit the exact spots where the armor was weakest. They used weapons that were specifically designed to get through draconian shields. Impossible, Zorkith said. How do they know our weaknesses so quickly? The battle was over in 10 minutes. The mighty dominance, which had destroyed entire fleets, was cut apart by enemies that had learned how to fight it in real time. Admiral Zorkith escaped in a life pod, but most of his crew did not. The enemy ships did not pursue him. Instead, they began to change. Zorkith watched in horror as the ships rebuilt themselves, becoming bigger and stronger. They were using the wreckage of his ship to improve their own designs. On the planet Zarian 7 below, Commander Vexamer was facing his own nightmare. He had brought 1,000 of his best Thraxian warriors to evacuate the mining colonies. Thraxians were born for war. With armor-plated skin and natural weapons that could tear through metal, the enemy had sent machines to the planet's surface. They looked like spiders made of liquid metal, and they moved in ways that hurt to watch. When Vexamer's warriors attacked them with traditional tactics, the machines learned and adapted within minutes. "Form battle lines," Vexamer ordered. "Advance in formation." The spider machines watched the Thraxians form their lines. They studied the way the warriors moved, the way they fought, the way they thought. Then they attacked in exactly the right way to defeat the formation. "Fall back to defensive positions," Vexamer commanded. Again, the machines watched and learned. They figured out the Thraxian defensive strategy and found the perfect counterattack. Every tactic that had worked for thousands of years was useless against enemies that could learn and adapt faster than thought. "What are these things?" asked Sergeant Kaliter, one of Vexamer's best soldiers. "I do not know," Vexamer admitted. "But they learn from everything we do. Every attack we make teaches them how to defend. Every defense we try teaches them how to attack." The evacuation became a desperate retreat. The Thraxian warriors, who had never known defeat, ran from enemies that grew stronger with every battle. The machines followed them, learning more about Thraxian tactics with each skirmish. Back on Earth, Captain Harrison was watching the reports come in. The alien news networks were trying to downplay the defeats, but Harrison could read between the lines. The galaxy's greatest warriors were being destroyed by an enemy that none of them understood. "The Kethver," Lisa Carter said, reading from her computer. "That's what they're calling themselves. Machine intelligence from the Outer Rim. They say each ship is controlled by an artificial brain that can think faster than any living being." Harrison nodded grimly. "And they learn from every battle. Every time someone fights them, they get smarter." "The Draconians are calling for more ships," Carter continued. "They think they can win through superior numbers." "They're wrong," Harrison said. "The Kethver will just learn how to fight bigger fleets. Numbers won't help." Around the base, other human soldiers were watching the news feeds. Sergeant Ben Murphy, a tough veteran with gray hair and scars from a dozen battles, shook his head in disgust. "Look at them run," Murphy said. "These are the same aliens who said we were too weak to fight." Corporal Amy Foster, a young demolitions expert with bright red hair, looked up from the explosive device she was working on. "Maybe they need to learn that strength isn't everything." "The Galactic Council has called an emergency session," Carter reported. "They're discussing new strategies to fight the Kethver." Harrison knew what those strategies would be. The aliens would try to fight the machines the same way they fought everything else, with bigger weapons, stronger ships, and more soldiers. They would use the tactics that had worked for them for thousands of years, and the Kethver would learn from every single attack. On the news, Admiral Zorkith was speaking to reporters. His scales were blackened from battle, and his proud voice was shaken. "We underestimated the enemy," he admitted, "but we will adapt. We will find new ways to fight them." "You will try the same old ways," Harrison said to the screen. "And they will not work," the reports kept coming in. The Kethver had taken 3 more star systems. They had destroyed 2 more alien fleets. Every victory made them stronger and smarter. The galaxy's greatest military minds were helpless against an enemy that could outthink them. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Walsh, Earth's best naval strategist, was studying the battle reports with intense concentration. "They're not just learning tactics," he said. "They're learning how each species thinks, how they make decisions, how they react under pressure. Can we beat them?" asked Major Kate Sullivan, a tough infantry officer with short black hair and steel-gray eyes. "Not the way the aliens are trying," Walsh replied. "The Kethver expect logical military thinking. They're designed to counter rational strategies and predictable tactics." Harrison looked around at his fellow human officers. They had been banned from military service, told they were too weak to fight alongside the galaxy's great warriors. Now those same warriors were being destroyed by an enemy that could outthink them. "Maybe it's time to show them what humans can do," Harrison said quietly. Murphy grinned, showing teeth that had been broken and rebuilt too many times. "About time, sir. I was getting tired of sitting on the sidelines." Foster looked up from her. "Explosives again. When do we start?" "We start now," Harrison said. Quietly. "The Council banned us from military service, but they didn't ban us from being ready." As the news feeds showed more alien defeats, the human soldiers began to prepare. They cleaned their weapons, checked their equipment, and made plans that no alien mind would ever think of. The Kethver were learning how to fight like Draconians, Thraxians, and Zephyrians. But they had never fought humans before. Soon, they would learn the difference. The Galactic Council chamber was nothing like it had been 6 months ago. Gone was the laughter and confident chatter. The great hall buzzed with fear and desperate voices as representatives from across the galaxy tried to find answers to an impossible problem. The Kethver had taken 7 star systems now. Their machine fleets grew larger with each victory, using the wreckage of defeated ships to build new ones. Worse, they were getting smarter. Each battle taught them new ways to fight, new weaknesses to exploit, new tactics to counter. Ambassador Krelthak stood at the center of the chamber, but he no longer looked proud and confident. His gray skin had turned pale, and his forearms shook slightly as he spoke. "The situation is critical," he announced. "The enemy has broken through our outer defenses and is moving toward the core systems. We have lost contact with the fortress." "World of Taldager," gasps echoed through the chamber. Taldager was supposed to be unbreakable. Its massive shields could stop anything, and its orbital defense platforms had enough firepower to destroy entire fleets. Commander Veximer limped to his speaking position. Half of his body armor was missing, and deep cuts marked his armored skin. He had barely escaped from Zarian 7 with a handful of survivors. "The machines learn everything," he said, his voice full of pain and confusion. "We tried every tactic. We know formation attacks, guerrilla warfare, defensive positions, siege tactics. Nothing worked. They adapted to everything within minutes." Admiral Zorketh rose from his seat, his proud bearing gone. "My fleet tried coordinated attacks from multiple directions. The Kethver learned our coordination patterns and turned them against us. They made us fight each other without meaning to." The chamber filled with worried murmurs in dozens of alien languages. These were the galaxy's greatest military leaders, beings who had conquered star systems and won impossible battles. Now they were admitting defeat against an enemy they could not understand. A delegate from the Crystal Collective spoke up, her voice ringing like broken glass. "Perhaps we need to use the forbidden weapons from the old wars, the planet killers, the reality bombs, and destroy ourselves in the process?" Krelthak replied. "Those weapons were banned for good reasons. Besides, the Kethver would probably learn how to use them better than we can." In the small human section, Lieutenant Colonel Helen Price sat quietly, watching the panic spread through the chamber. She was a small woman with gray hair and calm eyes, but she had seen more battles than most of the aliens in the room. "What about biological weapons?" suggested another delegate. "Or quantum disruptors?" "The Kethver are machines," Veximer pointed out. "Biological weapons won't work, and they've already adapted to our quantum technology." The debate continued. For hours, but it was the same conversation over and over. The aliens had tried everything they knew, and nothing worked. Their strength meant nothing against enemies that could learn to be stronger. Their advanced technology was useless against machines that could adapt to any weapon. Finally, a voice spoke up from the back of the chamber. It was quiet and calm, but somehow everyone heard it. "You're thinking like soldiers," Lieutenant Colonel Price said. The entire chamber turned to look at her. Hundreds of alien eyes in every color and shape imaginable focused on the small human. "Woman, I beg your pardon?" Krelthuk said. Price stood up slowly. "You're all thinking like soldiers, like warriors, like conquerors. You're trying to outfight an enemy that learns how to fight better than you do. What else would you suggest?" Admiral Zorkith asked with barely hidden contempt. "Dancing with them?" Price ignored the insult. "You're trying to be more logical than a machine intelligence. You're trying to outthink a computer brain that processes information faster than any of you can imagine." "Then what do you propose?" Veximer demanded. "If logic and tactics don't work, what does?" "Illogic," Price said simply. "Chaos, unpredictability, things that can't be calculated or learned from." The chamber erupted in alien laughter, but it was bitter and desperate now. "Humans and their crazy ideas," someone muttered. "Captain Harrison has been preparing for this possibility," Price continued, her voice steady despite the mockery. "We have volunteers ready to deploy immediately." "Volunteers for what?" Krelthuk asked. "A suicide mission?" "A rescue mission," Price replied. "To Taldagar." The laughter stopped. The fortress world of Taldagar was where the last great alien fleet was making its stand. If it fell, the route to the galactic core would be wide open. Every species in the chamber had family or friends trapped on that world. "You want to send humans to Taldagar?" Veximer asked in disbelief. "The same humans we banned from military service because they were too weak?" "The same humans you underestimated," Price corrected. "The same humans who think differently than you do." Admiral Zorkith slammed his clawed fist on his desk. "This is madness. Human ships are slow and weak. Human weapons are primitive. Human soldiers break like glass. Human soldiers also do things that make no sense," Price said. "They take risks that no logical being would take. They make decisions that computers can't predict. They fight in ways that can't be learned from." The chamber was quiet now. The delegates were thinking, but they were thinking like the logical, rational beings they were. They were trying to calculate whether humans could succeed where they had failed. "The Kethver learn from every battle they see," Price continued. "They study your tactics, your strategies, your ways of thinking, but they've never seen humans fight. They don't know how we think because we don't think like the rest of you." "Even if that's true," Krelthuk said, "human technology is centuries behind ours. What could you possibly do that our advanced fleets couldn't?" Price smiled for the first time since entering the chamber. "We could fail in ways they don't expect." The silence stretched for long minutes. Finally, a delegate from the Aquatic Federation spoke up. "The situation is desperate. Perhaps desperate times call for desperate measures." "You're talking about lifting the ban on human military service," another delegate said. "Temporarily?" Krelthuk added quickly. "Just for this crisis." The debate that followed was fierce but brief. The aliens were losing the war badly, and they had run out of logical options. The vote was closer than it had been 6 months ago, but desperation won over pride. "Motion passed," Krelthuk announced. "The ban on human military participation is temporarily lifted. Human forces are authorized to deploy to Taldagar under close supervision." Lieutenant Colonel Price activated her communication device. "Captain Harrison, you have authorization. The Council has approved your mission." Harrison's voice came back immediately, as if he had been waiting for this call. "Understood, Colonel." "We're already en route." "Already en route?" Krelthuk demanded. "You launched without authorization?" "We launched the moment Taldagar went silent," Price replied calmly. "Captain Harrison doesn't wait for permission to save lives." On the main screens, the delegates could see a small fleet of human ships moving toward the Taldagar system. The ships looked primitive compared to alien technology. They were smaller, slower, and carried weaker weapons than anything else in space. "This is suicide," Admiral Zorkith muttered. "Those humans will be destroyed in minutes." "Maybe," Price said. "But if they are, they'll be destroyed in ways the Kethver have never seen before, and maybe, just maybe, that will be enough." The Chamber watched the screens as the human fleet approached one of the most dangerous places in the galaxy. The delegates had little hope that the weak humans could succeed where their mighty fleets had failed. But for the first time in months, they had hope at all. In space, Captain Harrison looked at the tactical display showing the Kethver forces surrounding Taldagar. The enemy fleet was massive, composed of ships that had learned from every battle they had fought. They were perfectly designed to counter every known military tactic. "Ready, sir?" asked Lieutenant Lisa Carter from the navigation station. Harrison smiled grimly. "Ready to do something stupid, Lieutenant. Something completely, utterly, magnificently stupid." "Yes, sir," Carter replied. "That's what we humans do best." The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Taldagar system and immediately began doing things that made no tactical sense at all. The human fleet arrived at Taldagar in the strangest way possible. Instead of coming in formation like proper military vessels, they scattered in all directions like frightened animals. Some ships flew straight at the enemy, others ran away, and a few just spun in circles as if their pilots had gone crazy. In the Galactic Council chamber, the alien delegates watched the tactical display with growing horror. "What are they doing?" Admiral Zorkith demanded. "This isn't a battle plan, it's chaos." On his command ship, Captain Harrison was giving orders that would have gotten him court-martialed in any proper military. "Murphy, take your team and attack the biggest Kethver ship you can find, but don't try to win." "Don't try to win, sir," Sergeant Murphy asked over the radio. "Right. Just cause trouble and then run away. Make it look like you're scared." "Got it, sir. Running scared. I can do that." Lieutenant Commander Walsh was commanding 3 ships in what looked like the worst naval maneuver in history. His vessels moved in zigzag patterns, sometimes firing at enemies, sometimes firing at empty space, and once accidentally firing at each other. "This is insane," Walsh muttered to himself. "But it's working." The Kethver machines were designed to learn from battle patterns, but the humans weren't following any patterns. They were doing random, illogical things that made no military sense. The machine intelligence tried to analyze the human tactics, but there were no tactics to analyze on Taldagar's surface. Major Kate Sullivan was leading the strangest ground assault in galactic history. Her soldiers didn't advance in formation or take defensive positions. Instead, they ran around the battlefield like they had no idea what they were doing. "Foster, blow up that building," Sullivan ordered. "Which building, ma'am?" "That one." "No, wait, that one." "Actually, blow up both of them, but not at the same time. And make sure you miss the third one completely." Corporal Amy Foster grinned as she set her charges. "Understood, ma'am." Random destruction with no strategic value. The Kethver ground forces tried to counter the human attack, but they couldn't figure out what the humans were trying to accomplish. Every time the machines thought they understood the human strategy, the humans would do something completely different. In orbit, the space battle was just as confusing. Human ships would charge straight at enemy vessels, then suddenly turn and run away. They would fire all their weapons at once, then stop shooting for no reason. They would split up, group together, split up again, and sometimes just drift in space pretending to be dead. The Kethver flagship, a massive vessel that had learned from hundreds of battles, was trying to process what it was seeing. Its artificial brain was designed to find patterns and exploit weaknesses. But the human attack had no patterns, and their weaknesses seemed to change from moment to moment. "Analysis incomplete," the machine intelligence reported to itself. "Human behavior does not match any known military doctrine." Captain Harrison was watching the battle from his command ship, which was flying in lazy circles around a space station. "How are we doing, Carter?" "The Kethvers seem confused, sir, Lieutenant," Lisa Carter reported. Their response time is getting slower. Good, they're trying to process too much random information at once. Murphy status report. I attacked that big ship like you ordered, sir. Murphy's voice crackled over the radio. Didn't do much damage, but I sure made them mad. Now I'm hiding behind a moon and making rude gestures at them. Excellent work, Sergeant. On the planet's surface, the human ground forces were engaging in what looked like the worst military operation ever attempted. They would capture a position, abandon it for no reason, then come back and capture it again. They used explosives to blow up random objects that had no strategic value. They even stopped fighting sometimes to have lunch in the middle of battle. Zones, the Kethver ground machines, were designed to learn from enemy tactics, but the humans kept changing tactics every few minutes. Sometimes they fought like brave warriors, sometimes they ran like cowards, and sometimes they just did silly things that served no purpose at all. This is impossible, the machine intelligence concluded. Human behavior cannot be predicted or countered because it follows no logical pattern. But the humans weren't just being random. There was a method to their madness that only other humans could understand. They were overloading the Kethver learning systems with too much confusing information. Walsh, how's your part of the battle? Going, Harrison asked. Strange but effective, sir, Walsh replied. I'm pretending to retreat, then attacking, then retreating again, then attacking a completely different target. The enemy ships are moving slower now. I think their computers are overheating trying to figure out what I'm doing. In the council chamber, the alien delegates were watching in amazement as the human fleet continued its chaotic assault. Ships that should have been destroyed were still fighting. Soldiers who should have been dead were still causing trouble on the planet's surface. I don't understand, Commander Vexemer said. The humans are using terrible tactics, but somehow they're not losing, Lieutenant Colonel Price smiled. They're not trying to win the battle the way you would win it. They're trying to confuse the enemy so badly that it can't function. But look at them, Admiral Zorketh protested, pointing at the display. That human ship just flew straight into an asteroid field for no reason. Another one is spinning in circles. A third one appears to be attacking a moon. Exactly, Price said. The Kethver expect logical behavior. They're designed to counter rational tactics. But humans aren't always rational. On Taldager, Major Sullivan was leading her troops in what she called aggressive tourism. They would attack an enemy position just long enough to look around, then leave to attack somewhere else. They took pictures of interesting things they found. They collected souvenirs from the battlefield. Ma'am, why are we collecting rocks? Asked one of her soldiers. Because it's weird and the enemy won't understand it, Sullivan replied. Keep collecting rocks. Make it look important. The Kethver machines watching this behavior were completely baffled. They had analyzed thousands of military operations, but they had never seen soldiers stop fighting to collect rocks for no apparent reason. The turning point came when Corporal Foster decided to accidentally blow up a Kethver command center. While trying to demolish a completely unrelated building, the explosion took out a major coordination node, but it looked like a mistake. Oops, Foster said over the radio. Sorry, ma'am. I missed the target I was supposed to miss and hit the target I wasn't supposed to hit. No problem, Foster, Sullivan replied. Keep making mistakes like that. In space, the Kethver fleet was starting to malfunction. Their learning systems were overloaded with contradictory information about human behavior. Every time they adapted to counter one human tactic, the humans would switch to a completely different approach. Captain Harrison decided it was time for the final phase of his plan. All ships, prepare for the stupidest maneuver in military history. What's the order, sir? Carter asked. We're going to attack their main command ship, Harrison said. But we're going to do it wrong. Very, very wrong. The human fleet converged on the massive Kethver flagship, but instead of coordinating their attack, each ship did something different. Some fired all their weapons at once, others fired one shot at a time. Some aimed for the engines, others aimed for the weapons, and a few just aimed at random parts of the ship. The Kethver flagship tried to respond, but its computers couldn't process the chaotic attack pattern. The ship's artificial intelligence was designed to counter organized assaults, not random chaos from all directions. Analysis failure, the machine intelligence reported. Unable to determine optimal defensive configuration. That's when Captain Harrison gave the order that shocked everyone watching. All ships ram the enemy flagship, but don't actually ram it. Just make it look like you're going to ram it, then do something else at the last second. What happened next would be talked about in military academies for generations. Dozens of human ships charged straight at the HFY flagship like they were planning suicide attacks. At the last possible moment, some ships pulled away, others ejected their crews in escape pods while the empty ships continued forward, and a few actually did ram the enemy, but in ways that didn't make sense. The HFY flagship's artificial intelligence finally suffered what could only be called a nervous breakdown. Faced with too many contradictory decisions to process, the machine intelligence shut down to prevent permanent damage to its systems. Without their command ship's guidance, the entire HFY fleet began to drift aimlessly in space. The machine ships that had seemed invincible just hours before were now helpless. Their learning systems crashed from information overload. In the council chamber, the alien delegates watched in stunned silence as the human fleet continued its chaotic but effective assault. The mighty HFY forces that had terrorized the galaxy were retreating in confusion. "Impossible," whispered Ambassador Krelthek. "The humans are winning." "Not winning," Lieutenant Colonel Price corrected. "They're making the enemy lose." "There's a difference." On the tactical display, the HFY ships were withdrawing from the Taldager system. "They're perfect." 3 days later, Captain Jake Harrison stood in the same spot where he had been humiliated 6 months earlier. But everything was different now. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was packed with delegates who looked at him with respect, instead of mockery. The screens that had once shown charts of human weakness now displayed footage of the Battle of Tal Dagor. Harrison wore the same dark blue uniform, but now it carried new insignia, the rank of Admiral, granted by emergency. Vote just hours before. Next to him, Lieutenant Colonel Lisa Carter had been promoted to colonel and carried a datapad full of strategic plans instead of notes about insults. Ambassador Krelthek stood at the center of the chamber, but his forearms no longer gestured with arrogance. Instead, he moved with the careful respect of someone who had learned a hard lesson. "The Galactic Council calls this emergency session to order," Krelthek announced. "We are here to discuss the HFY threat and our response to it. Admiral Harrison, the floor is yours." Harrison stepped forward, and the chamber fell silent. The same beings who had laughed at him now hung on his every word. "The Battle of Taldager was just the beginning," Harrison said. "The HFY are regrouping, and they're trying to learn from what happened. We bought ourselves time, but we didn't win the war." Commander Veximer raised one of his clawed hands. "Admiral, how do we fight an enemy that learns from every battle? Your tactics worked once, but will they work again?" "No," Harrison said bluntly. "The same tactics won't work twice. That's why we need to do something the HFY will never expect." "What do you propose?" asked Admiral Zorkith. Harrison smiled grimly. "We're going to teach them how to be human." The chamber erupted in confused murmurs. "Teach them?" Krelthek asked. "You want to teach the enemy?" "Not teach them our tactics," Harrison clarified. "Teach them to think like us. And then, when they're completely confused, we'll show them something they've never seen before." Colonel Carter activated the main display, showing a map of the galaxy with HFY positions marked in red. "Our intelligence suggests they're gathering their forces in the outer rim, trying to process the data from Taldager. We estimate they need at least 2 more weeks to adapt." "2 weeks to do what?" asked a delegate from the Aquatic Federation. 2 weeks to learn how to be unpredictable," Harrison replied. "And that's when we'll hit them with something completely predictable." The chamber was quiet as the delegates tried to understand this strategy. Finally, Commander Veximer spoke. "Up, Admiral, I don't understand. First you fight them with chaos, now you want to fight them with order?" "Exactly," Harrison said. "They're expecting us to be chaotic again. So we'll be the most organized, predictable, by-the-book military force they've ever seen. We'll do everything exactly according to standard procedure. Admiral Zorketh's scaled brow furrowed in confusion. But if they learn to counter predictable tactics, won't that make us vulnerable? Not if we're predictable in ways they don't. Expect, Colonel Carter explained. We're going to use every species' traditional tactics all at once. Draconian strength, thoraxian formations, Zephyrian speed, aquatic fluid movement. Everything combined into one massive, perfectly coordinated assault. But that's been tried before, protested a delegate. Multi-species operations never work. Well, because our tactics don't mesh together. Harrison nodded. That's what makes it perfect. The Kethver have seen each species fight separately, but they've never seen all of us fight as one unified force. And more importantly, they've never seen humans coordinate everyone else. The chamber buzzed with excited conversation. The idea was simple but revolutionary. Instead of each species fighting in their own way, they would fight as one galaxy-wide military force with humans providing the coordination. You want humans to command the entire galactic fleet? Krelthok asked. Not command, Harrison corrected. Coordinate? Each species will do what they do best, but we'll make sure everyone works together. The Kethver can learn to counter any one species' tactics, but they can't learn to counter tactics that change based on what everyone else is doing. Sergeant Ben Murphy's voice came over the communication system from the human fleet. Admiral, we've got incoming priority transmission. From the Outer Rim, looks like Kethver scout ships are probing our defenses. Time to move, Harrison said. Delegates, I need your answer now. Will you trust humans to coordinate a galaxy-wide military operation? The silence stretched for a long moment. These were the same beings who had considered humans too weak to carry weapons. Now being asked to put their entire military under human coordination, Admiral Zorketh was the first to speak. The Draconian fleet volunteers to serve under human coordination. The Thoraxian ground forces as well, added Commander Veximer, one by one. Every species in the chamber volunteered their forces. The vote was unanimous, something that had never happened in the history of the Galactic Council. Motion passed, Krelthok announced. Admiral Harrison, you have command authority over all galactic military forces for the duration of this crisis. Harrison felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. In 6 months, he had gone from being banned from military service to commanding the largest military force in galactic history. Thank you, he said simply. Colonel Carter will coordinate with your military leaders. We have a lot of work to do. As the session ended, delegates crowded around the human section, eager to discuss tactics and strategy. The same beings who had once mocked human weakness now wanted to learn from human thinking. On the main display, the tactical situation updated in real time. Kethver forces were massing in the Outer Rim, preparing for what they expected to be another chaotic human assault. They had no idea what was really coming. Major Kate Sullivan's voice crackled over the communication system from the forward staging area. Admiral, the joint training exercises are going better than expected. Turns out most species fight pretty well together when they're not trying to prove who's strongest. Good to hear, Major. How's the integration going? Sergeant Murphy is teaching Thoraxians how to improvise creatively, and they're teaching him how to use their formation tactics. Corporal Foster is showing Zephyrians how to use explosives in ways that don't make sense, and they're showing her how to move faster than thought. Harrison smiled. And the command structure? Working perfectly, sir. Turns out when you tell each species to do what they do best instead of trying to do everything, they're a lot happier to cooperate. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Walsh's voice joined the conversation. Admiral, I've been working with the Draconian naval commanders. They're excited about the idea of coordinated fleet actions. Apparently they've wanted to try combined tactics for years, but nobody could figure out how to make it work. What? About the Aquatic Federation? Harrison asked. They're bringing their underwater combat specialists, Walsh replied. Turns out they can fight in space just as well as underwater if you give them the right equipment. The preparations continued. Around the clock. Human officers worked with alien commanders to create something that had never existed before, a truly integrated galactic military force. Each species contributed their strengths while humans provided the coordination that made it all work. Together, Corporal Amy Foster was particularly excited about her new assignment. "Admiral, you should see what we can do with Zephyrian speed and Thoraxian explosives. We can set charges that move faster than the enemy can track." Just remember, Foster, Harrison said with a grin, "this time we're being predictable." "Yes, sir, predictably awesome." As the combined fleet prepared to move out, Harrison stood on the bridge of his new flagship, a vessel that had been jointly constructed by all the galaxy's species. It was faster than a Zephyrian scout ship, stronger than a Draconian battlecruiser, and more flexible than an aquatic Federation swimmer. "All ships report ready, Admiral," Colonel Carter announced. "Signal the fleet," Harrison ordered. "We're going to show the Kethver what the galaxy looks like when it fights as one." The greatest military force in galactic history began to move toward the outer rim, thousands of ships from dozens of species, all working together under human coordination. The Kethver were expecting another chaotic assault like the one at Tal single quotes Dagor. They were about to face something much more dangerous, a galaxy united in the depths of space. The Kethver collective intelligence processed the approaching fleet. Its analysis was simple: large conventional force approaching. Tactics appear standard. Probability of victory, 97.3%. The machine intelligence had no way of knowing that it was about to face something that couldn't be calculated or predicted the combined strength of every species in the galaxy, coordinated by the one species that thought differently from all. The rest, Admiral Harrison looked out at the stars ahead and smiled. 6 months ago, aliens had mocked the idea of humans in military service. Now the entire galaxy was following human leadership into the most important battle in their history. "All ships," Harrison announced to the massive fleet, "prepare for coordinated assault. Every species, every ship, every soldier, we fight as one galaxy, one people, one family." The response came back in dozens of languages, but the message was the same: "Ready, Admiral, for the galaxy."